Our moderator, Jeff Chang, has a bio too long to even get all the way through, but he's my big brother, so I'm going to take my time. Jeff has written extensively on culture, politics, arts, and music. His first book, Can't Stop, Won't Stop, A History of the Hip-Hop Generation, is the seminal text on the text. He edited the book Total Chaos, The Art and Aesthetics of Hip-Hop. Also wrote Who We Be, The Colonization of America. He does everything for everyone. His book won the Ray and Pat Brown Award for Best Work in Popular Culture and American Culture. He was a finalist for the NAACP Image Award and the Dayton Literary Peace Prize. He ran the Institute for Diversity and Arts at Stanford for a long, long time and made it what it is. His latest book, We Gon' Be All Right, Notes on Race and Resegregation, was published in September 2016. You can clap for that text. Go ahead. It was named the Northern California Nonfiction Book of the Year, and the Washington Post declared it the smartest book of all time. Of the year. His next project is a biography of Bruce Lee. He's been a USA Ford Fellow in Literature. He is part of the KQED Asian Pacific American Local Hero Club. He's part of Yerba Buena Center for the Arts as one of its YBCA 100 list makers. He does everything for everyone and co-founded Culture Strike and Color Lines and wrote for The Guardian. And he leads with a big heart and a wider joy and is a great father and a great mentor and a great educator. So please put your hands together for our three panelists, Michael, Dawn-Lyen, and Jeff Chang. Please put your hands together. Now they're going to come to the stage, and you're going to clap till they get to their seats, and it's going to be raucous. Louder, louder, louder. Let's welcome back to the stage Dawn-Lyen Gardner, Rachel Kaadzi Ghansah, Michael Bennett, and our amazing, outstanding moderator, the indomitable Jeff Chang. Thank you.
Wow, wow, wow. Good evening, everyone. That was weak. This is Oakland. Good evening, everyone. Yeah. We got an author, an artist, an athlete here, an actor. Come on. This is a beautiful thing. I'm so honored, actually, to be able to be on stage with all of you. Thank you so much for, not just for your amazing presentations, but for all that you do, for all that you represent for us out in the world, and for all the change that you're individually and collectively bringing about. Thank you so much for all you do. I'm wondering, actually, if we could start with a little bit of a personal type of thing. I was so moved by each of you, the ways that you presented the approach that you take towards your art and your activism. And I'm wondering if you could tell us, each of you, if there was a particular moment where things kind of locked into place for you as far as thinking about, oh, this is my purpose. This is what I need to do. This is how I need to be able to be in the world. Who's first? Ladies first. Yeah.
I don't. My instinct is to say not yet, because I think that it's a constant act of evidencing or trying to do something again and again and again with the same sort of energy. So I don't think I've plateaued in the sense where I'm just like, it's done. I know what I'm going to do. It's perfected. But at the same time, I think that I've always written, and I think that it's the vehicle for all of my self-expression. And so I think I used to write these columns in middle school for our paper, where I would invent these elaborate comics. I mean, I would basically do a whole newspaper myself. And people really liked them. So I kind of enjoyed putting myself out there and people understanding my comic books, I don't know, that I would write. It was rewarding. And so I think getting a little confirmation helps solidify something.
Dawn-Lyen?
I don't know if this is on. Can you hear me?
I
you
can
hear
hear
me?
you here. Can you all hear her?
No?
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was about to be my theater self. It's evolving. It's evolving. I know for me, I know that Queen Sugar has been such an important, critical part of that process because it allowed me to really step into a public space, a quote, celebrity space, with something that was so aligned with who I am and with what I actually cared about. So when I was speaking and promoting the show, I was able to speak exactly to the things that I actually wanted to talk about, those conversations that I most wanted to be in as an artist. So I know that that was critical, and I think entering that public space was a wake-up. I was really, and still I'm fairly disturbed at sort of the silos that I feel like media can create. And then I sort of put myself to task with how I was participating in that, how I was now stepping into those spaces. So now I feel like what is most, I don't know, at issue for me or front page for me is this idea of vulnerability and the ask, the call, the cry to allow ourselves to be uncertain. I think we've spent a lot of time, and this is sort of where I've landed right now. I think we've spent a lot of time figuring out how to stand for ourselves and what we know, what we need to be defensive about, what we need to protect, what we need to stand up and say something about, and that can't go away. It shouldn't go away. But I'm listening for and looking for the spaces to not know together. So that's evolving, but that's where I find myself right now.
Yeah, for me, I think it started when I was a child, really. I think when I look back at my life and I think about the moments that helped me, get to this spot, I think about my mom. Everybody in my family went to all-black college, so I spent a lot of time at Grambling University, and one of the things that I got to do was I was always at these football camps with Eddie Robinson. Obviously he's the most winning football coach ever. So I used to be at these camps, and part of the camp was African American Studies. So it's like an NAACP camp, but it was like football too. So it was like I was like, Mom, why do I have to go to Louisiana again? I want to stay in Texas. But so I used to go there every summer, and I think like being in that surrounding and learning the history of who I am and what my culture's been through. Like there's a sense of sadness and there's a sense of being proud. And I think along that line of being able to learn about the athletes who came before me or the athletes that were doing stuff and listening to the coaches talk, it kind of just like propelled me as I started to get older and I started to learn about these things and I started to not be scared to use my voice. And obviously my mom's a teacher and she's been a teacher for like 25 years, so it was always this connection to the community, and both my parents are like that. So I think I just got it really early from my parents to like be very vulnerable, like she said, but also be able to have empathy for people, things that are happening around you. And I think as a black male, those are something that people don't really talk about, is vulnerability and sensitivity and emotions. I think a lot of times you get shed off, and I think that happens to form a sense of like PTSD. But I think because my parents were very connected to that, it helped me like be the man that I am today.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that strikes me is all of you write so deeply about trying to help people recognize the humanity in each other, and in a sense, the work that you do, the art that you do, in your writing, Rachel, in your acting, Dawn-Lyen, in your being on the field, right, in your athletics, and also in your activism too, Michael. And one of the things too that resounds, I feel like, through all of you is this sense of legacy, this idea of carrying forth. You talk about your Ghanaian and Southern roots, you talk about your Chinese and Black roots, you're talking here about your parents and the legacy as well of Grambling and what that means as an institution culturally. I'm struck too just about this particular moment that the idea of family and community is so much what we're reaching for. Would you agree?
It's been for me the last 3 years really striking at how much how much more time I've spent with my family in the last 3 years. And it's definitely connected again to Queen Sugar that so much of the show is about family and about legacy, especially for Black communities. I think, I mean, Michael's right. For me, my whole sense of identity can't be separated from my parents, and it can't be separated from the kinds of work that they were into, the kind of values that were in our house, for sure. And there is a sense, I have a sense deeply, that either of what I owe or what I'm sowing or something for the past and the future. I really don't see myself existing outside of that context. So I can feel that I'm in this conversation of what's the vision? What is the vision that we're moving toward? Is that vision still the beloved community? How do we define that? How do we articulate that now? I feel like that's the biggest call, and maybe the biggest problem is the inarticulation of that vision. And there's nothing simple about that. Like, it's not like it's easy to name those things. So that, for me, that's where I find myself in terms of legacy, is constantly sort of going thank you to the past and thank you to both branches of my family, and constantly saying I promise to the future. But that, to me, to be honest, looks more nebulous than I want it to.
I think what she's saying, like, that the past and the present and the future is all connected. I believe in that too. Like, personally for me, like, you know, digging deeper into my roots, or like digging into the African side of me, going into that part and being in Senegal and being at the point of no return, and, you know, feeling the essence of what that really means. Like, what does that really mean to be, you know, snatched from your family and put into change and being into bondage? And being there is kind of like, in those spiritual journeys like that, it's just kind of like helped me kind of understand what it means to have a legacy, to be a descendant of somebody who has had that happen to them. You know, when I think about my daughter, and I think about if I went into my house and she was gone and I never ever saw her again, and I never thought about what could have happened to her. Did she have a family? And nothing ever happens. And I think about I'm the descendant of that. I'm the descendant of somebody who was strong enough to make it across the transatlantic, somebody that was coming here to live through slavery, somebody who could come here and create their own. And I feel like because I have that inside of me, to be silent and not to let the sun shine on my voice would just be so cowardly. And I think that's important, to always honor those people who came before me, because they risked so much for me to be in this moment. And times like that, it's like whenever I think about that, that's what keeps me going and keeps me powering through life.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we talked briefly that we both have Louisiana heritage, but you're Grambling and I'm Southern.
Yeah.
So my grandmother taught at Southern University. My great-grandmother taught at Southern University, which is so unusual.
Wow.
And then taught high school in Alexandria, and my mom was a professor. And so my mom actually, her water broke while she was teaching with me.
Oh my God.
And so I sort of feel like I was born in a classroom, but I'm not an academic. But I do think that I look back on the women in my family, because I do come from a very extensive matriarchy, and I think about how I don't think of myself as an artist, but I do realize that I have a few more liberties than they were able to have. And so whenever I am able to sort of make art, I think of myself as being an extension of their silences, where they had to make very pragmatic decisions of like, I'm going to get a PhD, I'm going to be a teacher. And I also, I always say that I feel like I am the thing that they were rooting for that's arrived at their horizon, that I have all of their energy and all of their efforts can manifest in whatever I put forth. And so there's an enormous sense of responsibility and also obligation of that they didn't do all that work for me to flounder. And so when I try to think about what I'm going to write about or what I'm going to think about next, I often think about how am I going to correct something that's been told about black people where we haven't had the authority to tell it properly. And so that's very important to me in my work.
It reminds me of B. Mike, the artist from New Orleans, right? Who has a T-shirt that says, "I am my ancestors' wildest dreams," right? B. Mike, right? NOLA is amazing. One of the things that strikes me, though, is that we're in this moment, this historical moment of division, right? In which so much feels like it's tearing apart, and that part of what we're trying to do in our movements and individually is to reach out, to try to find, you were talking about vulnerability, we're trying to find ways to be able to connect with each other, and vulnerability, noting where people are hurting and moving to them, right, is sort of part of what's happening, I think, in this particular moment. I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about the politics of the other side, because your piece about Dylann Roof, one of the things that strikes me about that piece is how rootless he was. Rootless, R-O-T-L-E-S-S, and ruthless, of course, as well. Right. That he didn't have a sense of roots, and that there was a way in which he was spinning as an individual. Talk a little bit about what that piece meant to you and what you found as you were exploring that. And I'd love to hear what the two of you think about this particular moment as well, as you see what's happening around you.
It was interesting. The first time I started to think about reporting about the alt-right and white identitarian movements was long before anyone was talking about it. And so it seemed like I was kind of having like a fringe episode of paranoia where I'd be like, I'm going to go and report about neo-Nazis. And people were like, there are no neo-Nazis. What are you talking about? Hillary's going to win and everything's going to be great. And what had happened was that I was going through, because I'm writing this book of, I don't know why I took this on for my first book, of 400 years of Black American history. Whoa.
In one volume? That was the writer finger.
I've been going through the South and doing all this reporting, and I'd gotten to Charleston, and I'd gotten to Mother Emanuel Church where the horrific shootings occurred. And at night I would go around Charleston and have these crazy conversations with people in Charleston about race and what had occurred, and I was like, something is brewing. Something is wrong here. People are not getting this. And that was when I was starting to think, Dylann is not a singular event. Dylann's a continuum of how we talk about race and racial violence in America. And so when I think about reporting or writing that story and like why I did it, it was because at the time my grandfather from Louisiana, he had just passed away, he was maybe 98, and my grandmother had passed away. And when I looked at those shooting images in the courtroom, I imagined that occurring to them. And it made me I went to Quaker schools my whole life, so violence is not something I know well, but I wanted to kill him. And I didn't know how I was gonna do it. And I was sitting in the courtroom and he was I don't want you to talk about my family, and he was his own lawyer, so he was controlling the proceedings, and he kept saying to the victim's family, you're talking too long, or I don't wanna hear about these people, or they're dead, or whatever he was saying to insult them. And it was just so rage-inducing that the reason I decided to write it about Dylann and not my original angle of writing about the people who were lost was that Dylann was convinced that he should have the right to silence and to not have his life investigated. And I felt that if I couldn't physically harm him, I could harm his desire to have privacy.
Wow.
So,
It's sort of that thing of privilege being the ability to be able to disengage, which I think is what you're talking about, Dawn-Lyen, in your talk, right? That the way that he could preserve his sort of safety would be to disappear, right? To be able to
the controlling of the narrative of that, so that the record that's out there is always troubled person emerges out of nowhere and kills a bunch of people. No, troubled man of 25 years was enabled to think that he would have this autonomy and this right to violence. Yeah. And that means many people were complicit with this, and they all need to be called out. So,
So the question always comes back around, like, So what does art do in this kind of condition, right? What does being in the culture do? What can it do in this kind of situation where we've got society so deeply polarized? And I guess I wanted to throw that question to you, Dawn-Lyen.
One of the things that, to go back to John A. Powell for a moment and 4 years ago, but one of the things that I remember from that conversation, he said the words, in this, I think I'm paraphrasing, is we are makers of each other, or we are making each other. And I feel that as culture makers, we're not only in charge of narrative and story, but we're in charge of, or at least we are contributing to, how we are walking with narrative and story, how we contain it, how we receive it, how we ingest it, how we encourage each other to become and evolve through it. I just don't see any route right now that will be the vehicle for empathy to evolve beyond what it is right now, which is what I think needs to happen. I don't see it happening through legislation necessarily. I think that's a part of it. That's a big part of it. But I don't think we have the trust anymore of politicians the way that we did back when everything was going down in the 60s that needed to go down legislation-wise, that shifted everything. I don't think I don't think that, and I think with reason, we don't extend that kind of trust to our lawmakers because of special interests, because of all the money, because of all the stuff. But we do that with artists. Right now, I believe artists have the ear of the people. And it is so critical that we are responsible with what we are saying, that we are also the voice, of the people. And that we are constantly, to sort of get back to what you were saying a second ago about Dylan Roof and basically whiteness, that we are constantly deepening a conversation. I think that's what I've always been leaning into as an artist. It's what Queen Sugar does, I think, in a sense, is deepen these conversations around identity and blackness and evolution and legacy. So that's what I think our role is, and I truly believe there's no other force that could fulfill it. It is the arts that will do that.
Michael, this reminds me of this really powerful story that you tell in your book.
First of all, why is my chair so small? I don't know. It's like I'm really not comfortable in this chair. But just go ahead. It's just so small. Like my back is so big. I feel awkward in this chair.
I do see that. Yeah. Are you uncomfortable? Should we get you like a stool?
Yeah, I got bad back. Go ahead.
I feel like it's perfectly sized. I just want to say that for me, but so go ahead. It's all right.
Man, how do I follow that? I had like a real, no. So actually, no, I do want to come back to this because there's a story in your book where you're talking about, this is going to the point about deepening the conversation, right? Where you all decide as a team what you're going to do, and you do it, and then the next day you show up at the practice field, and there's a protest going on. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, what you did in that particular moment.
Yeah, I think at that moment we had like a deep conversation about each other. About where we came from, our background. Because on the football field, it's like this idea that we all come together and we don't have any quarrels. Like everybody is the same. But it's like when you start to hear the stories of where somebody's from the Midwest, or somebody's from LA, somebody's from over there, and then to have a deep conversation about that, it gets really heated. And finally, when we made a decision about what we were going to do, I was driving to work, and there's all these military vets, and they had all these signs, and they was like, I think they said, "Fuck Michael Bennett" or some shit like that. And so
This is like the day after.
this is the day after,
You all
so
had,
I'm driving, I'm like,
well,
damn.
we should like just clarify for folks what you all had done, because it was momentous, right? This was like right after Charlottesville, right?
Yeah, we had just,
So-
like, a lot of us had took a knee, or we took a seat, we were sitting down, we didn't take a knee, we were sitting down, it was like maybe like 15, 20 of us. And so, and you know, they were talking, I guess they said I was the one who inspired it, but I was like, don't say that, you know. But then, so I was driving to work, and like I said, it was a sign that said, it literally said, fuck Michael Bennett. And it was like, there was these white guys, there was military vests, and they were saying all this different stuff. And I thought I think they thought that I wouldn't stop, or they didn't know if I would pass by. So I literally parked my car and I got out. And they probably thought it was going to be like this big black guy who's going to be really violent and all these different things. And I was like, and I went to have a conversation with him. I was like, so let me hear why you think this is wrong, and why you think that the stance that we're taking is un-American and unpatriotic. So he goes into this whole spiel about this and that in the military. And I said, wait, you know, my dad was in the military, my uncle was in the military, my whole family served in the military. And he was like, oh, I didn't know that. I was like, obviously you didn't know that because you didn't research. And then so he goes on, he starts to talk about the military vet. And I said, you know what, as me, I can never understand what it's like to be a military vet, and I don't try to. The difference is that you're trying to understand what it is to be a black man. And so he was like, I was like, I'm not saying that you have to agree with everything what I'm saying, but you have to be able to have some empathy and listen to the stories and think about from a position, you know, whenever there's a shooting that happens or something happens with police and a person, a black male or a woman or a Latino, people they pick sides. They say, well, I'm on the police side. I believe that we should be policed. And somebody will say, well, I believe she's a victim, but nobody ever thinks about the family. Like, what kind of trauma does that happen to a family when they lose a mother or they lose a sister? I've been in those rooms when I've talked to, you know, the mother or the son or the daughter of the person who's been slain, and the pain that person feels. You can't even say anything to them because you can't even say, I think I understand, because you can't. You don't know what it feels like to lose a person like that. And I wanted to tell him, like, you don't understand what it feels like to wake up in a world as a black male or a black person and see everything about your existence is not pure. Like, what it feels like to be, you look to tell your daughter that her life matters, but then when you turn on TV, somebody's slain. How can you explain that to your child? And so I was trying to convey that message to him, and I think we did a great job of agreeing. And to what you were saying about politics and everything, and I believe it really starts in the school. You know, I teach Black history at my daughter's school, and the reason why I teach Black history is because I teach it because I want the other kids to understand the history of somebody so they can have a sense of respect for their contribution to America. And I think a lot of times in society, we don't have that in the schools anymore, where people don't learn about the things that Native Americans contributed to America, the things that Asian people contribute to America, Latin people. And I think if we had a sense of that at a young age, because it's really the only thing that we all do as a child, we all go to school. And so this is the perfect place to, you know, really teach that. And not in the sense of like, oh, this person's better than that person, but in the sense of understanding what it is for somebody to go through, or how they really helped America. When I say that, you know, when Angela Rye said we built this shit, when Angela says that, it's the truth. We did build America, the things that we did, and to have somebody understand that, it just helps them have a better sense of the person and what they've been through and their journey through America.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you all could tell me a little bit about risk. We got questions coming in? Okay. I also don't know how much more time I have.
She not.
15? Okay, cool. So let me ask this one time about risk. Because it seems like the other thing that we need to do in this particular moment is to take risks, such as you're stopping here at the gate to talk with people who are saying, fuck Michael Bennett, right? And all of you are facing risk. I imagine that writing about Dylan Roof, that got a whole lot of backlash for you on the net. No?
No, it didn't.
Good. Well, that's beautiful.
That's beautiful.
That's a beautiful thing.
I'm not online, so.
You're not online. You're on Instagram. It's an awesome account. But
My 200 followers, you just snitched.
I think it's more like 200,000, but hey. But let's talk about risk. Like, what do you think we need to risk in this particular moment in order for us to be able to move through this particular movement, as artists, as people working in the culture?
I think our pride. I think we need to risk our pride. I think pride is something that holds us back to being able to come talk to somebody and have that conversation before we resort to violence or we resort to something that's, you know. And I think me as a male, that's something that I feel like that happens a lot with males. We're so prideful that we don't even want to open up or have that vulnerability that you were speaking about. And I think that's super important for, as a male, to really, you know, share that with younger males so they can have that idea of what a man looks like. I think a man is changing so much since the beginning of time, and now it's coming to the point where we can cry, we can do all these things, and I think pride has held us back from having those conversations when we disagree with somebody, and instead of resorting to killing somebody, you know, why can't we just have a conversation and move on? I think pride is one of the things that's really holding America back, because we're so prideful to really think that we're the only country that didn't have a dirty history or a dirty laundry, and it's the honesty of it. We've done everything that every other country has done, but we just paint a better picture of it and make people understand it a little bit different. And I think if we can have that pride, you know, they talk about reparations and all these different things, but at the same time, it's like we got to have that pride to have that true conversation and let our guard down, to really have the empathy and compassion for what happened to people around us.
Yeah. Rachel, Dawn-Lyen?
Yeah, the question was, what do we have to
Risk.
I think we have to risk feeling more empowered to imagine that these institutions are not everlasting and that they don't always have our best interests at heart, and that we can call them out for that. And that it's really important not to want to be inside of them for all of the protection they afford us, you know, at the risk of giving up our voice, giving up our autonomy, giving up our values. I went to go see Hortense Spiller speak, and she said this brilliant thing that, you know, family is a tricky word. Sometimes when we want to insert ourselves into belonging and kinship, we're asked to sacrifice things or do things that we actually don't think are our integrity, are part of our like integral being. And I think in the past, I think there was a time where I thought it was more important to be a part of, you know, a certain organization or this or that. And I think what I realized in the last few years is that when I stepped outside of them and said, I'm going to write what I want to really write, whether or not they believe these ideas are real or not, is where I really obtained my strength and also like my sort of like authorial power. So I think there's nothing that can be gained from sacrificing what's really important in order to fit neatly into something that's melting away. You know?
Heard a lot of
That was so gorgeous.
Yeah.
And your piece on Dylan Roof was incredible. It's incredible. My first answer when you asked that question was, I don't know. I don't know what's needed right now, what we need to risk. And that is actually what I think we need to risk, is saying, I don't know. I feel like I feel like at times we're responding to this pressure. And the pressure is about, I don't know, popularity and media and pressures that aren't necessarily intrinsic to what our human need is. What our human need, our need for connection is demanding and asking us. I think if we were able to stand, you know, the thing about white supremacy and white supremacist group, I was at the Facing Race conference, and the last session that was at the panel, one of the speakers on it said, you know, I've been spending a lot of time in chat rooms for, you know, white supremacist groups all over the world.
Right, yeah.
And she said there was one thing that connected them, and it wasn't hatred, it wasn't shared philosophy, it wasn't just rage and anger, it was belonging.
Yeah.
And it was like a light bulb went off. And I don't know how to stand in a room with someone who was a proclaimed white supremacist. I don't know how to say, how do we be together? How are we going to be together? Yeah. I don't know. But what I can guess is that exactly what was true for Dylan is true for a lot of people, that there's a root that's been cut. I know that that's what I watched and with my colleagues who were unaware in this anti-racist group in LA who were very courageously taking on their own history. That's what they were doing, was going back to when that root was cut and trying to figure out where the trauma was in their own lines, in their own lineage. I don't know how to say, I don't know, but I think if we don't say, I don't know, we're never gonna get there. We're never gonna move past a certain place. So I don't know what those spaces look like to be able to say that, but I'm in feverish search of them and commitment to creating them where I can.
Yeah. So this question is from the audience, and it actually follows really nicely from from what you just said, Dawn-Lyen. What are the rituals and ceremonies that each of you practice around this work of belonging, for this work of belonging?
I don't know if I have exact rituals and practices. I spend a lot of time with my family. And that is, I guess, in a sense, a practice.
Sure.
Especially as this more public space has become more of my reality. I think that is, yeah, I think that is. Because there is something about sitting across from your 92-year-old Chinese grandmother, you know, being the daughter of an immigrant. Spending time with my dad who has Parkinson's and dementia, and that being my route to Alabama, and my route to being from the South. So I think that's my current practice, is rooting myself with my family as much as I possibly can. And I'm very blessed to live in LA where they all live, so I can do that.
Can we say smoking weed? Is that still?
Can you say what?
No, I'm joking.
You ain't joking.
Nah, I'm just joking. Nah, I agree with her too. I think family too. I think being able. No, for real though. I do think although smoking weed is not bad. No, but no. For me, I think
This is Amsterdam, so it's all good.
We're in California, so.
Yeah, we're in Cali.
Yeah, I agree with her. I think family too. I think when I look at my daughters, I connect with them and I look at what they're going to be, you know, and what type of world they're going to be in. And whenever I come home and I feel that love and that from my wife and my children, I think that's what keeps me grounded and keeps me belonging. That's really my ritual. I try to be, every time I wake up when I kiss my wife, I try to be in that moment of like, this is the most important time, that kiss or that hug. And those are the rituals that I try to be in, is trying to be in the now, and every single thing that I do, don't let my mind think about something else when I'm in that moment. So whenever I give her that kiss or that hug, it's really a kiss or a hug. It's not just a habit like, oh, bye. It's like, no, this is the essence of like everything. Like, you are my everything and this is my everything. And I think that's important to have that to keep going.
I think I read this one thing where you had said, if I win a game, I go home and watch a movie with my daughters. If I lose a game, I go home and watch a movie with my daughters.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Because my daughters are everything. I think, you know, as I talk about in my book, you know, obviously I grew up as a male, so I never really, I had a lot of brothers too, so I never really had like a understanding what it's like to be around women all the time. And now that I'm a father of 3 daughters, it's like, I'm like, dang, this is beautiful to be in to see, like, you know, whenever one of my daughters says something like, oh, only men can do that, and then my other daughter says, that's not true. It's like, it's like they're, you know, they're building their own camaraderie and their own strength, and to watch that happen as a father and still challenge myself as a man to be able to, you know, have a conversation with my daughter, like, okay, let me have a conversation with her. I don't know, as a man, I'm like, oh, if I talk to a son, I'm like, oh, I know exactly what to say. But when I'm talking to my daughter, it makes me have to listen. And then I can't talk until after she's done talking, because I have to understand what she's saying. So I think for me, he's done a great job of well-rounding me out as a person.
Rachel,
Yeah, I
practices,
think-
rituals?
I mean, my job is to listen to other people talk. And so it's been very helpful in the sense that I don't feel a great sense of unwavering authority. And I think the thing that I've been trying to do of late is to not let these sort of political circumstances, these external circumstances, threaten and sort of alter the values that I've held for most of my life. And so I had friends say, you know, like, I can't deal with certain people anymore, you know, after this election, da-da-da. And I think that is one way to sort of like retreat into the self and the things where I can have the easiest conversations. So I've had to really actively say, I'm not going to be defeated in that way. And so I'm gonna keep listening and I'm going to keep engaging, but I'm also gonna keep speaking and like saying what I think. You know, so if I'm talking to someone who has a completely controversial or offensive point of view to me and I'm listening to them talk, I want to listen, but I also want to be able to say, well, this is why I think what you're saying troubles me. And not feel that I have to be silent in order to get along.
Yeah. That's engagement.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's giving the other person some room and some respect for that. You all have talked about, there's another question from the audience. Thank you, audience. You all have talked about intersectionality in one way or another. What are some challenges you've encountered, and what do you do to navigate that?
Challenges with intersectionality.
In terms of trying to practice, I guess, intersectionality.
I sort of want to ask that person, what do you mean?
Yeah,
Stand up. What do you mean?
I know.
Who is it? Anybody? I'm sure the person's in the audience.
they don't exist.
Be a nail.
No? Okay.
I think personally for me,
Oh,
like,
sorry.
I understand. I mean, for me, what I understand from that question is like, it's like when I first started talking about Black Lives Matter, right? And I was thinking about it as from one perspective, like, just police brutality, Black lives, like this is it. But then I had to understand, like, as a Black male, to talk about trans or like lesbian or, you know, you don't talk about that. And how do you support that as a man and you're in the Black community without seeing being somebody being like, well, why are you supporting that? But then my whole thought about intersectionality is that, like, this person's life matters regardless of it is, and that's a Black life, regardless of gender, whatever they choose is theirs, and to support that. And that's for me was like my first, another step into my understanding of that whole thing was like, okay, how do I understand that and have so much respect for the person because of they are brave enough to live in their truth. And that was something that I had to learn as a male growing up in this society, especially when it, you know.
You know what I will say about that? I feel like the greatest challenges I've had about intersectionality or is within myself. That's what I feel. It hasn't been like outer experiences with one community or another, or something happened or an event, whatever. It's been reconciling, being at that intersection, holding space for the tension at times. It's been very interesting since the Me Too movement and the Time's Up movement. I'm finding myself, I remember at the end of last year, I was really debating whether or not this was sort of going to be it for me in terms of acting, because I just felt like all of the stuff came out of the pot after Harvey and after all the stuff that, you know, was a part of the Me Too movement. And it felt like I don't want to put it back. But I don't know how committed everyone is, not just for the gender equity issues and the sexual harassment and sexual assault issues, but also for the reality of stories that do not center people of color. And like, how are we as committed to fighting for everyone's truth and everyone's story and everyone's voice? And I'm just feeling like, God, I just feel like a sales girl at a white supremacist convention in this business. Like, that's what I feel like all the time. And so I feel like it's in myself that I've been most deeply making space for the intersection of multiple things. It hasn't been issues, you know what I mean? It hasn't been in community. It's really been within myself.
Rachel?
I'm gonna keep thinking about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, time for round robin. I throw out a word or a phrase, and only one of you gets to answer. But you just jump in, react to it, give us your answer. Okay. Okay. This word, which you used actually in your speech. Yeah. Tethering.
Yeah.
I just think it's
Tethering.
dope that word's coming back because of Jordan Peele. Tethering. No? Anybody?
He brought
Tethering?
that back? I thought I brought that back.
You brought that back? Okay. All right. Tom Brady's hair. Tom Brady's hair.
Is this real?
This is real. We're doing the round robin
Wait,
right now.
can we pick them up, or once they're out, they're gone? Can we
They're
just,
out,
like, come?
and you just like somebody's got to. Obviously, this one's for you, Michael.
What?
Is there another Michael?
Okay.
I'm pretty sure there is.
Nipsey Hussle.
That's hard. Did you know him? Because I want
No, I
to.
didn't know.
I didn't know him, and I can't speak to his death from a place of either knowing him or his music very well. Like, that's just the truth. But as someone from South LA, that was like, it was surreal and painful in a way that's hard to articulate. It's also complicated. I saw this article that I can't remember who wrote, but they were talking about this complicated grief because he was not without his own journey, his own evolution when it came to LGBTQ issues, for sure. It was hard to imagine, being from South LA, but maybe being trans, maybe being, identifying with the LGBTQ community and having this pull of someone who was doing something unprecedented, making tech cool, making something that we're not seen as, oh, we have agency in this location. And he made it like, no, you should go after this. That was hard.
Yeah, for me, I listened to Nipsey Hussle music for so long, so, it was painful for me because, and being here, when artists die or something, it's not very often that I feel like I'm so affected by it, and I feel like this was the first time in a long time that I felt like I was affected by it, because to me it was like he was giving everything to his community, and it's like he died in the same community from something that we always talk about, gun violence or toxic masculinity. When I think about the guy, I could have just walked away, but the impact that he was having, it was just like, to me, it was bigger than Tupac, because Tupac talked about a lot of things, but he didn't have all this action that Nipsey Hussle was having. He had so much action, the things he was doing, giving people jobs out of prison, parks, technology, all these different things that he was doing and finding his voice and having an impact. And for other people, and you look at the impact of his death and look how many people stood up for him, and watching Bloods and Crips come together, like that doesn't happen very often.
That's right. Yeah.
Watching all these different people come to his death and be like, and something come out of it, and people are doing positivity. I think so. It was hard for me to see something like his death happen, and it was just overwhelming for me just to know that somebody was doing so much for the community and died at such a young age, and and the way he died was just like, I could never picture him dying like that from something like that. And it was just overwhelming for me, man, just to be, and all my friends, that's all we talked about for a week. I couldn't even sleep for like the whole week, because every day I was like, why? I couldn't understand why it happened. I was constantly looking up things on every single platform, Google, Bing, every single thing, trying to figure out, is it more than what they just said? Is this just it? This can't be just the reason why this man left the earth, because it's more that he can give and what he was given. And so for me, I was really impacted as a person that's in the spotlight and giving back to the community, it just touched my heart personally.
We have time for just one last quick question here. So in this moment, what gives you hope? What gives you hope to keep on going?
Well, that we've been in worse circumstances before and prevailed. And so for me, I feel very relieved writing a book of history, because at every moment there's a sort of intervention of, wow, things have been very bleak, they've been very grim, and we have changed the world multiple times as Black people in our search for freedom and our resistance to injustice, and we will do it again. And so it's very temporary, any sort of like existential angst I have about right now. Right now is just one more sort of like gulf that we'll wade through.
I think for me too, two things that kind of give me hope. I was in Haiti, and my friend, one of my best friend, he's played with me. And he's from Haiti, and he builds schools, and it's this particular school that he built, and it's across a river, and just his brother and these two brothers, and they walk 10 miles to go to school every day, and one of the brothers drowned in the river, and when he built the bridge, the kids kept going to school. So for me to see like all the things that they're going through, and to see that they constantly are pushing forward to have change, it was really powerful for me and overwhelming. And it was similar to the same thing that happened to me in Senegal. Me and my wife, we work with a whole bunch of girls in Senegal, and they were having these problems with massive rapes, and so we were sitting at this table with a round table of these brilliant girls. Like I couldn't even like fathom what they was going through, and to see the power and their voice. And one of the girls, I asked her, I said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And she said, "I want to be a policewoman so I can stop the rapes." And then another young girl said, "I want to be a doctor because and I wanted to create this app because so many people are dying because they get to the hospital and there's nothing, they don't know how to put them in a system, and they're dying in the waiting office in the lobby." And to hear two young people have a issue what's happening in their country and to have a way to solve their problem, it just gave me so much hope to see and look into their eyes, and I can just see the hope and resilience of people regardless of their circumstances. People are survivors, and I think for me that gave me a lot of hope to know that these young kids are the people who are going to be leading the future, and I'm happy about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My dad gives me hope. My dad, I have this very complicated relationship with my dad. He's something of my muse in my work and in my life. He is from the South, from Alabama. And when I've asked about growing up in Alabama, he does not offer much. The sort of one story he keeps coming back to is, let me tell you this. The sheriff of our county was the head of the KKK. And then he just sits. And I think about both before and after him. I think about all that it took for him to exist, all that survival, all of that human will, and then spiritual rootedness to survive. And then I think about his grandkids and him being able to now watch them. He now lives with my brother, and he's able to watch them, and he's teaching them to play chess. My brother's teaching them to play chess. My dad taught my brother, so they all know how to play chess. And my nieces, she was describing, my brother was sort of testing her about the chess pieces on the board, and he said, well, what's the most important piece, the most valuable piece, the most important piece on the chessboard? And she said, well, in this game it's the king, but in real life it's the queen. And I'm watching him watch her, and there's something about seeing my dad having moved and come from a legacy of survival, and having married a Chinese woman, and watching these kids shift the narrative that really hadn't shifted before them. Something about that gives me hope. Something about that says, there's a moment after this moment. Something about that says, even in the moment that you find yourself in, he could not have known at 12 years old with the sheriff of his county being the head of the KKK that he would be in this moment. He couldn't have known. So that gives me hope. There's something about the truth of, the truth that's beyond this moment.
Well, your work gives us hope, so thank you for that. Please join me in thanking Rachel Kaadzi Ghansah, Dawn-Lyen Gardner, Michael Bennett.